Welcome back to the Dr. Francavilla Show. Today, we are going to talk about the scale. Specifically, we are going to talk about making peace with the scale. The scale is something that a lot of my patients really hate. And I think that having a good relationship with the scale, or at least the neutral relationship with the scale, is actually pretty important in our weight and health journeys. And I'm just an information is power sort of person. So today I want to sort of encourage you to change your relationship with the scale, talk about how to weigh yourself appropriately, what to do with that information, and hopefully make you feel a little bit more comfortable with weighing yourself, because it is kind of an important thing when you are trying to lose weight, trying to maintain health, and it's just a number when we are thinking about our health. So a lot of my patients really hate the scale. And, sometimes I will weigh them on the way, to the exam room, and I haven't quite paired the scale right. And so it is not ready to weigh, and it will pop up with this number and it says 0, right? It says 000. And my patient says, "Oh, I wish." Like, what do you mean you wish? You wish you weighed 0? Like, you wish you were dead? That cannot possibly be a better number than whatever the actual number is on the scale, right? So that's how much people hate the scale, that like they'd almost rather be dead than face the reality of what that number is. And this goes back to some of the weight bias and weight stigma that we've talked about before on this podcast, which is that we give a lot of weight. We give a lot of our value, a lot of our worth to our weight, to the scale, and that's not okay, right? So we need to start thinking of this number in a more neutral way. We need to think about this number as just a piece of health information instead of tying our weight to it. So that's kind of what we're going to dive into today and talk about how to weigh yourself appropriately, why it might be important, and work on changing that mindset around the scale that can put you in a really negative place with it. So there may be some people who are not ready to use a scale, are not ready to see their weight. If you have a strong history of body dysmorphia, so really dysregulated, really abnormal thoughts about your body shape and size that you maybe have gotten help for or are currently getting help for, if you have an active eating disorder or a history of an eating disorder, then weighing yourself may not be something you're ready for yet. You may need to talk about this more with your therapist or whoever your clinician is who's helping you with those things. And if you don't have someone helping you with those things, please get someone who can help. But if you're like most people where you maybe don't have the best body image in the world and you put way too much of your self-worth on a number and on the shape of your body and on the scale, I think this episode is for you. And I find that very few people have a neutral relationship with the scale, right? We put way too much meaning in this number and we need to step away from that. So why is weighing yourself important? We do actually have pretty good data that weighing yourself is a tool that can help with weight loss and weight maintenance. So one of the things that we can do in order to lose weight and to maintain weight when we've lost it, or stay a healthy weight if we're trying to do that, is just be aware of what our weight is. Because most people are kind of programmed to be slowly gaining throughout their lifetime. So most of us, if we do nothing, we're going to gain some weight. And some people are way better at gaining weight. And in the modern world, it's really easy to gain weight. And so some people will, easily gain weight. So the scale can be one tool that we can use to just kind of have a reality check, right? Is our body doing what it's supposed to do and slowly gaining weight? And are there things we can do to kind of fight that, to mitigate that? And are the things that we're doing working, right? So the scale can be that reality check, that check-in of, is what we're doing actually working? I always thought, I just kind of maintain my weight. I know a lot about this. This is what I do for a living. I have the right genetics, blah, blah, blah. And for about 6 months, a couple of years ago, my scale was out of battery and I didn't weigh myself. And finally, towards the end of the year, getting close to, the holidays, And I finally replaced my batteries, and I had gained what for me was a significant amount of weight. It was probably the highest weight I've ever been at as an adult. And I was like, well, I guess that regular weighing does make a difference, right? Like I was like, not checking in for 6 months, I gained weight. And for some people, that could have been very emotionally distressing. But since I do this for a living, I was able to say, well, that makes sense, right? I haven't checked in a while. I haven't really been trying to do anything. This is what happens, right? This is the reality of what happens if we're not trying to maintain our weight. And so I hope that you can start working on having that neutral relationship where you're able to weigh yourself and check in and have that be one of the things that helps you check in with yourself. Do you need to pay a little more attention to nutrition? Do you need to be a little more consistent with movement? Do you need to reach out to whoever your healthcare team is or whoever your support is for losing weight or maintaining weight if you're starting to gain? Instead of getting very emotional about it and getting upset, just taking it as a number and saying, oh, well, I guess that makes sense. I haven't weighed myself in a while. I haven't really been focusing on anything intentional about my health right now. It makes sense that I've gained a little weight, right? So that's what we're shooting for, is that sort of neutral relationship. The scale is just a tool. It's just a number. And we use lots of numbers in healthcare, right? I don't see people get very upset about their calcium level very often, right? I don't see people get that upset about their pulse rate, their heart rate very often, their respiratory rate. Probably most of you have no idea what a normal respiratory rate should be, right? You don't get upset about the potassium level in your blood, right? People do get upset about their height. They do seem to argue with me. They always think they're a little taller than they are also. But for the most part, we're just neutral about these numbers. For me personally, I had really, really bad vision. And every time I went to the eye doctor for most of my early adulthood, my vision was worse and worse and worse. And that is not something that we take personally, right? I was like, this is terrible. This is bad luck. This is bad genetics. But I didn't take these worsening and worsening numbers as something I was doing personally wrong, right? And so I want to encourage us when it comes to a number on the scale to be more neutral about it, right? It is not a judgment of you. It is not a judgment of how well you're doing. It's just the number. But if we ignore it completely, then the chances are it's going to keep going up. And so we probably do want it to be one of the numbers we look at, just like we look at your cholesterol, your blood sugar, your calcium level. These are just numbers, and they just tell us where you're at. Okay, so that's a mindset around weight that I kind of want you to keep in mind as we go through this. So one of the things I will also compare this to is, financial. I am not someone who checks my finances on a super regular basis. I don't find that rewarding or interesting. I do not like to micromanage my bank accounts or my accounting or my budget. But I've also found over time that completely ignoring it does not go well, right? If you have no idea if you have paid your credit card, you're going to have credit card fees, right? If you have no idea how much money is in your bank account, you're going to overdraw that account, right? If you have no idea if you are on track to have enough money to retire or enough money to go on vacation or enough money to buy the purse you want to buy, you're not going to be able to do those things, right? And so people can get very distressed about money, right? Money stresses people out a lot. But being objective and just facing the reality of, do you have enough money for your goals? And if not, something needs to change, right? You either need to spend less or you need to make more money. And if you can just be more neutral about it instead of thinking, oh, I'm bad with money, I'm bad at my budget, I don't make enough, I spend too much, all these judgments, and just take it for what it is, you're probably going to reduce your stress a lot about money, right? Same thing with that number on the scale. You don't need to stress about it, right? Stress doesn't help you lose weight. We just had a podcast episode about how stress and sleep can make you gain weight, right? If you're not getting enough sleep. And the reality is, stressing over your weight, like, you are not going to lose weight from stressing over it, right? But you're probably going to continue to gain weight if you completely ignore the scale. So I hope this is sort of building that case for you that it's important to know what you weigh, but you can't tie your self-worth to it. It's just a number. I think one of the places people really upset themselves with the scale is having an unrealistic expectation of what that scale is going to say when they get on it. So if I went to check my bank account right now and I was expecting to see $1 million in my account, I'm going to be sorely disappointed, folks, because there's definitely not $1 million in my account, right? And if I go in with that expectation that I should have $1 million, and if I don't, like clearly I'm doing things wrong. I'm smart. I'm hardworking. Why don't I have $1 million in my bank account? I'm going to be very disappointed, right? And if we go in with this unrealistic expectation of what we expect the scale to say, we are going to be disappointed. We're going to be angry. We're going to get really emotional. So what I see people do is they have this idea in mind of what they should weigh. People get this number from all different places. Maybe it's the BMI chart. Maybe it's the lowest weight you ever were, right? Maybe it was your wedding day and you were 170 pounds and you'd been crash dieting for 2 months and stressed. And it is the lowest weight you've ever been as an adult. You haven't been that weight in 10, 20 years, but you're stepping on the scale and you want it to say 170. And part of you is expecting it. You think you failed if you're not at that lowest weight. You're going to have an emotional response, right? Because you are setting yourself up to be upset that you no longer weigh 170. If you haven't weighed yourself in a while, you just need to get on the scale and see what it says and not have an expectation for what it's going to say and not have a judgment. And you need to get on that scale planning to not judge that number. There's no bad number. There's no good number. It's just where you're at today, right? It doesn't matter if you weigh yourself or not. If you weigh 225 pounds, whether or not you step on the scale and see that number, you still weigh 225 here on Earth, okay? So if you weigh 225 pounds, again, whether or not you're on the scale to find that out, that's still the reality. And if you don't know, then you can't do anything about it. And if you get on the scale 5 years later and you're now 250, you have no idea that you were 225 5 years ago, right? You may have some sense that you've gained weight. Maybe your pants don't fit as well. Maybe you don't feel as well, but you don't really know where you're at or where you're starting from. So when we get on the scale for the first time, if it's been on a while or the first time when we're starting to make some changes around our health, this is just a baseline number, okay? And it doesn't matter what it is. There's no good number, bad number, right number, best number for you. It's just the reality of where you're at today. And don't go in with an expectation of what you think it's going to be. Don't go in with an expectation of what number you're okay with. Don't go in with an expectation of what's good or bad. It is just a number, right? Most of you probably don't know what a normal calcium level should be, right? Think of it like that. I don't know. I don't know what's good for me. I don't know what's bad for me. I'm just going to be neutral. This is just the weight I am today, okay? Because if you don't know, you don't know. Now, there are people, and maybe you're one of these people as you're listening that's already arguing in your head about this, that weight doesn't matter. And in many ways, it doesn't, right? That's kind of what I've said here. The exact amount doesn't matter. It's just a baseline. It's where we're at today. And some people say we shouldn't weigh at all, especially people who are more in that health at every size movement or in the eating disorder world. They say, like, let's not focus on the scale at all. Let's not use scales. And I personally bought into that actually for a long time. And if my patients like did not want to weigh themselves or had a lot of images around a bad body image, I may encourage them not to weigh. And I actually think I did harm. You know, one of the things that is hardest about being a doctor is sometimes we learn more, we learn better, we learn new things, and we realize that maybe we weren't doing things the best way for a while. And what I saw after years of doing this is the patients that we decided not to weigh because maybe we weren't focusing on weight. We weren't focusing on weight loss. We were focusing on mood disorders or positive body image or just focused on health, which is what I'm all about. But they would continue to gain weight. And some of those patients gained quite a bit of weight. And I think their health got a lot worse over that time period because we sort of said, oh, it doesn't matter. And in reality, I think we should have had some focus on the weight, right? We should have said, it doesn't matter. It's not the thing we're going to judge you on or put your self-worth in or even make as your main health goal, but let's just know what it is. And if it's starting to go up at a really abnormal fast rate where you're gaining 20, 30, 40 pounds in a year, that maybe we do want to know that, because maybe we should start thinking about doing something at that point. Because if you gain 30 pounds a year, in 3 years, you've gained 90 pounds. And my guess is most people are not feeling better or healthier if they've gained 90 pounds in 3 years. So I think, again, this is just not judging the number, knowing where you're at today so that we can make sure it's progressing in a reasonable and healthy way, whether that's staying the same, gaining weight, or losing weight. We don't know if we don't know. So that is just your baseline, okay? Just your baseline, and it's one piece of data. I think the more important pieces of data are, how do you feel, right? Do you have good energy? Do you sleep better? Is your reflux down? Do your joints ache? What do your clothes fit like, right? Do you feel comfortable in your body? What does your blood work show, right? Do you have diabetes? Have you perfect blood work with normal cholesterol and normal blood sugar? Is it improved from the last time you checked it? Those are really the health goals I'm looking for. But the weight gives us one piece of the puzzle. Just like I do care about your blood sugar number, not the only thing I care about when I see someone, but I do care what your blood sugar is, right? It's one piece of the puzzle. The scale is one piece of the puzzle. So how do you weigh yourself? How do you do this correctly? How do we get an accurate weight? So the first thing that you want to do to weigh yourself is do it first thing in the morning, or if you're someone who doesn't have a traditional schedule, do it first thing when you wake up for your day. So you want to do it first thing in the morning. That's going to be the lowest weight for most people. Did you know you are actually burning calories while you sleep? You're burning a fair amount, and you're literally just breathing it off as you sleep, okay? So you are going to have your lowest weight for most people in the morning. So I also recommend that you use the restroom first. So empty your bladder. If you're someone who has a bowel movement early in the morning, go ahead and use the restroom before you weigh so that you have sort of that lowest baseline weight. If you don't need to use the restroom, no need to force anything. Weigh yourself naked or in the same clothes every day. So if you have like a set of pajamas or a type of pajamas you weigh, or if you feel comfortable weighing yourself nude or mostly nude, that is going to minimize the amount of clothing that is adding to weight. It's not uncommon in my office that someone weighs 3 pounds more on my scale than at home. Some of that's transitioning, you know, they've eaten, they've drank throughout the day, but a lot of it's clothing. Even though clothing feels very light, it easily adds up to, 3 pounds for most people. And in the winter, those clothes can get even heavier. And then of course, shoes can often weigh a ton. If you have a pair of heavy boots, your boots could weigh 5, 10 pounds for some of those big, heavy Sorels. So don't weigh yourself with shoes on. And the most minimal clothing or consistent clothing is going to be helpful. And then how often to weigh yourself? I encourage most of my patients to weigh themselves on a weekly basis. So picking one day of the week, whether that's Monday, Friday, Saturday, picking a consistent day of the week to weigh themselves. I do have some people who will weigh themselves daily. And then some people who don't want to look at the scale too often might only do it monthly. But I think weekly makes the most sense for most people, and that's often enough to get some feedback. If you weigh yourself every day, you do need to be the sort of person who can look at the big picture with your data, because you shouldn't be losing that much weight day to day, right? So you need to be able to look at those trends over time. Okay, did I lose or maintain over a week, a month, or years? You're not going to expect to see major changes over the course of a couple of days. That's not a reasonable expectation. So you're going to have times where you gain a little, especially if you're measuring really frequently, you'll see little ups and downs, and you have to be okay with that. So for most people, I think weekly gets rid of a lot of those ups and downs. Now, if you know that the scale is not going to be super accurate for you that day because maybe you are someone who is having your period that day, maybe you've had recent travel and you know you're someone who gets like a lot of leg swelling and water weight from flying or traveling, maybe don't weigh yourself that day, okay? If you know that there's some water weight that's just not going to be helpful and that's not something that your healthcare provider has you measuring. But if you have not been sticking to your plan, or you just went on vacation, or it's been the holidays and you've been having more sweets, or you haven't been exercising, or you had a recent surgery and you haven't been as active, or all these reasons our weights go up and down, then I would encourage you to still weigh, but just take that information with a grain of salt. So if you've been inactive because of an injury, for example, and you think your weight is up, that's okay. Just take that with a grain of salt. Like, okay, I've gained 3 pounds. I'm injured right now and I haven't been working out very much. So that all makes sense. Or I've gained 15 pounds from this injury. Maybe I need some extra support right now, because if this keeps going that way, that's going to start to become a pretty big problem. So taking that information with a grain of salt, but don't skip weighing yourself just because you're expecting it to be bad. Okay. You want a little bit of that feedback, that accountability. And a lot of times it's not as bad as you think, right? A lot of times you think, oh my gosh, I've gained 5, 10, 20 pounds, and you step on the scale and it really hasn't been that much. And then you just get that feedback for yourself. So I think all things to keep in mind. But again, if you know that you always have 5 pounds more on your period and it just upsets you to see that, or you have a lot of water weight from a flight, maybe give yourself a couple more days that week before you weigh yourself. But don't come up with excuse after excuse not to do this, because part of this is we want that reality check, right? We want to know what's happening when we've started to eat dessert every day. We want to know what happens when we've stopped working out every day. We want to know what's happened when we've changed medications that maybe cause us to gain weight or cause us to lose weight, right? We want that reality check. So recording it somewhere is also probably helpful. We get these ideas in our head, and sometimes they're not true. And so recording them can just make it real, right? Are you really going up or down? Maybe you're just staying the same. I have people come into my office all the time and they're convinced they've gained weight or convinced they haven't lost weight. And I look at my chart and I'm like, no, you actually have lost weight. You're doing great. It just doesn't seem like it, or you don't remember what number you were, but nope, you've actually lost 5 pounds this month. So you're doing exactly what you wanted to do. So record it somewhere, whether that's an app or a spreadsheet, but if you want to be able to look at that big picture data, you need to write it down somewhere. Okay, one of the questions that I would imagine you might have is about body composition scales. So these are those scales that can tell you like your body fat percentage and muscle mass. And this technology is really cool. I've been a big fan of it for a long time. It was actually the very first purchase I made for my clinic was an InBody machine so I could do body composition in my office. The really high level machines like the InBody I have in my office are thousands of dollars. The new ones are on the order of like close to $10,000. But you can get ones for like $60 at Amazon or Target. So you can imagine that there is a lot of difference between a $8,000 machine and a $60 machine in terms of the information it can give you. So a lot of the ones that you can get for $60 to $100, they may not be very accurate. So do not take any of that information too personally or too to heart, because again, that information is not always going to be super accurate. The body fat percentage difference from my home scale that I have to my fancy InBody at the office is quite dramatically different. But the home scales can often give you somewhat precise information, meaning even if it's not actually what your body fat is, it's probably accurate when it tells you if it's going up or down. So you can certainly use those scales at home if you like that information. And I do have some patients who have found brands that actually are pretty good and are very comparable to the fancier testing I do in my office. So you can always kind of compare it to a fancier study that you can get done and see how accurate your specific machine is. So for some people, they like that. I'm a pretty big fan of body composition testing because the scale is just the number, right? The scale does not tell you if your muscle is going up or down, if your fat is going up or down. And I'm in the business of fat loss, really. I don't want you to lose weight. I want you to lose body fat if you're losing weight. If anything, I want most people to gain muscle mass or at least keep it. And so body composition can give us that information about, do you have muscle mass that's going up, especially if you started strength training. Maybe you've listened to me enough and you're doing CrossFit. Maybe you've started a weightlifting program. Maybe you're even just doing more yoga. You could be putting on muscle and losing fat, and body composition can give you that information. And so that's another reason to take that number on a regular scale with a grain of salt, right? It's just a number, and a scale is just giving you a little bit of feedback, right? It's not giving you your worth. It's just giving you a number. Okay, so In summary here, the scale is something that can really be helpful as you are trying to maintain your weight or lose weight. It's just a check-in. It's really important that we don't put too much self-worth on the number and that we just take it as an objective number, like our vision or our calcium level or our pulse rate, right? These are not things we tend to stress out about very much. They're just numbers in healthcare, and the scale is just a number, okay? But if you don't know, you don't know. And in my experience, people who really completely ignore the scale have a tendency to be more likely to gain weight over time because they just don't know. And so I'm a knowledge person. Knowledge is power. If you know, you can do something about it. But you can't tie your self-worth to it. And then you need to set yourself up with a realistic expectation, ideally no expectation of what the scale is going to say, but don't expect it to be whatever that lowest lifetime number is for you. You're just going to set yourself up to be frustrated and not successful. And then when you weigh yourself, do it first thing in the morning, use the restroom first, wear no clothes or the same clothes so that you have a consistent weight. And I recommend for most people, if you're going to weigh on a consistent basis, that weekly is probably a pretty good timing, but some people like daily or monthly, and that is fine too. Okay, so your homework today is to weigh yourself in the morning tomorrow if you haven't done it in a long time. And when you do it, I just want you to be neutral about it, okay? I don't want you to tie any worth to that number. It's just a number. Write it down. It doesn't need to mean anything, but it gives you an idea of where you're at so that you can see if you are reaching your goals, because if you don't know, you don't know. All right, that's all I have for you today. Until next week, take care. Thank you for listening to the Dr. Francavilla Show, where we learn about all things related to weight and health. If you love this podcast, make sure to leave those 5-star reviews and share this podcast with a friend or loved one. If you have a topic about weight and health you want me to tackle, head over to the website, thedrfrancavillashow.com, to submit your question. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss next week's episode. Take care.